introduction.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Schuler. I'm the co-chair of IFMA Boston's think tank committee. On behalf of the board of directors, thank you for joining us today to explore job search strategies of 2025. IFMA is the only organization solely dedicated to advancing the facilities management profession. Our chapter's mission is to be the go-to resource for facilities managers and those supporting the built environment in the Boston area. We offer year-round programming, publications, training, webinars, tours, networking, and special events. Today's webinar kicks off our 2025-2026 program year, so keep your eye out for your inbox for upcoming events this fall. We've got a great year planned. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. So Robin Beauchamp, who MSGCDF, maybe Robin, you can explain to us what that is when you get going, is the Assistant Provost of Cooperative Education and Career Development at Wentworth Institute of Technology, better known as WIT for some of us. With over 25 years experience, with over 25 years in the career search and HR industry, Robin brings deep expertise in guiding professionals through career transitions. And also with us is Leah Olson. She's a senior associate at the Bridger Group. So the Bridger Group is a top-ranked executive recruiting specializing in commercial interiors. And she manages the full recruitment cycle. Oh, sorry. Leah is the top-ranked executive recruiter specializing in commercial interiors. She manages the full recruitment cycle and brings valuable insights into hiring trends and candidate positioning. And now I'm excited to turn this over to Gretchen Barron of Creative Office Resources. She's a think tank committee member and former IFMA Boston board member to lead today's discussion. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you, Michelle. Gio, do you want to go through the other slides? I think we have our agenda here, which obviously we're doing the welcome and introductions. And then together, Leah and Robin are going to talk about the overview of the current job market, some tools and resources for your search, resume and cover letter tips and tricks. Robin also has some AI information for those of us who need to know more about that. And then some interview prep and tips. And then we'll have questions at the end. You can absolutely put your questions in the chat now. I know some folks did email them in advance, which is great. And we will get to those at the end. If it's something you really want to kind of like jump in the middle, just put it in the chat and we'll see if we can get to it then or at the end. So welcome everyone has joined us, and we are recording the session as well, so it will be available if folks want to go back and look at it and be like, oh, I'm not working on my resume today, but 6 months from now you want to go back and look at something. The recording will be available as well. And for Kelly and Robin, for your students, I think it'll be a great resource as well.
And just an FYI, Gretchen, it lives out on the IFMA Boston YouTube channel, or that's where it will live, but it will also be mailed to people who attended the meeting today.
So we're all YouTube stars is what you're telling me, Gio.
Yes, indeed.
That's my residual check any moment now. So just a few of our reasons for joining IFMA. We do this at the beginning of every session. You attend programs such as this for free. We also, because this is part of our soft skills series, it's open to everyone, but we have many members only events, which include tours, industry specific information events, all kinds of great stuff with our vendors. We have members only newsletter, The Loop, which also includes job postings. You can post there, you can see the postings. We have great peer-to-peer networking. I know I use my IFMA network all the time. For those of us who've passed the CFM, the Certified Facilities Management certification, for most of us, we've used the assistance program. It's taken different forms over the years. If you plan to become a CFM, it is the most important way to do it is to do the prep class that IFMA Boston offers. And that's also unique to our chapter. So that's another benefit. And then we have career resources such as this. We have great other resources available, including our jobs board. And we're always looking for committee volunteers. So the best way to get the most out of your IFMA membership is to be part of a committee, because you will meet the most members, you will have the most engagement, you'll learn the most. So we always have openings on our membership committees, partnership, think tank, which I'm part of. We put on all the programming, emerging talent, which was previously known as career expansion, which is focused on students, and then our events and logistics, who put all the great stuff together for us behind the scenes. So let Gio, myself, or Michelle know if you're interested in joining a committee. These are our core values. I'll just leave. I'm not going to read them all, but you can see we are really dedicated, as we said before, to supporting facilities managers and those in associated industries. I'm sort of in an associated industry, so those are our values. And these are our awesome sponsors for this year. So our partnerships are the best way to get involved for our associate members, and they provide a lot of the funding for our great events, our series like this. So we thank all of our partners for their support. And we have this great podcast. So Kate Thibault, for those of you at Wentworth, you probably know Kate because she teaches there. She has a great, FM Forward has also been an in-person event, but right now it's a podcast. So make sure you click on our website and you can take advantage of that information.
And it does live out on anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can look for FM Forward and you will find the past episodes and hopefully some new episodes coming shortly from Kate. And I'll take this one, Gretchen. This one there is also a version out on the podcast sites that are conversations with our vendor partners. So that list that you just saw of our partners that help support our programming throughout the year, they all do a 15-minute sit down with Kate to talk about how they help the FM, our end users, with situations they might have. What do they do to make their job easier? So
we have our two awesome experts joining us today. Leah, who I've used when we are hiring. Leah has helped us secure talent, and she always has her pulse on the industry. So if you're in the contract interiors world, not just furniture, but Leah's team also does lots of construction, building product sales, all of that kind of stuff. And Robin and I have worked closely because I've hired many a co-op student, and as a Wentworth alum, I know the value that Wentworth's career office brings. So I have worked with both of these ladies many, many times, and I'm so excited for them to join us today and share their expert opinions, answer our questions. And I will sort of be monitoring the chat. Gio's monitoring the chat. So if you want to throw your questions in the chat, that would be great. And we're going to get started.
All right, I think that's my cue.
That's your cue.
Hi everyone, I'm Leah. Yeah, like Gretchen and Michelle said, I'm a recruiter. I work for a company called the Bridger Group. We recruit pretty much exclusively in the commercial interiors and building products industries. And I have about 5 years of experience now under my belt. We always like to joke though, in recruiting years, it's like dog years. Like it's actually like probably 7 times as much experience in my world. But yeah, ultimately I run what we call a 360 desk, which means similar to your real estate agent, I work with buyers and sellers. I work with hiring managers and candidates, and I manage that process from start to finish. As an individual, yes, my specialty is furniture. However, especially in the world of architectural products, demountable walls, all of that, I do touch that construction side of the industry a decent amount. But like I said, my firm recruits heavily in the building products and building materials side of the business as well. And really just kind of want to jump in first and foremost to just what are we seeing out there? As a company, we are still very busy. I feel like the number one thing if I can leave you with anything today, it's don't let the fear rule you. There's a lot of there's a lot changing in the industry. There's a lot of concern, obviously, about where the industry is going in the future, what it's going to look like, what that landscape will look like. However, we are still busy, people are still hiring, and ultimately, there are still really great opportunities out there that we need people like you for. And so if I can leave you with anything, like I said, just don't be afraid. My encouragement is going to be, put yourself out there and know with confidence that you have something to offer. We have needs, we have holes that we need to fill, and we have people leaving the job market like crazy for a myriad of different reasons. And so there are great opportunities out there. And when it comes to interviewing, it really is a law of averages. It's like, I don't know if anyone here has done the online dating thing. I met my husband on Hinge, and I went on so many bad dates before I found a great opportunity. And it really is a law of averages. It can be very intimidating, of course, because you're putting yourself out there, you're subjecting yourself to feedback, you're subjecting yourself to rejection, and that is an emotional game. So as you're starting this process of what comes next for me in my career, my encouragement is, you're gonna put on your mental fortitude hat, because it's brutal. The job search process, the landscape has changed dramatically, even in the last 5 years since COVID, and it's tough. It is tough to get through an interview process. And so as you're starting this kind of journey of what comes next for me in my career, just know it's going to be brutal, but don't let it be discouraging. Keep track of where you're at in all of the processes, and just continue to put your best foot forward, because like I said, it is a law of averages. The more you put yourself out there, the more likely you are to get something great back. We're seeing a lot of interesting things that are affecting the industry. I'm sure you guys are probably even more familiar with this than I am, but with return to office, forcing redesign in a lot of places, with like the lock-in effect, renovations are on the rise. We're seeing people invest in their spaces in different ways. Candidates, there's a new generation of talent entering the market that wants something different out of their workspace than what our parents wanted, what our grandparents wanted, and that is creating a need for new environments, new collaboration, new processes, new, all of the things within the job market. So all that to say, what I'm seeing, if you are considering where might I take my career, areas that I'm seeing that have been strong for several years, pre-COVID, going into COVID, and are still strong post-COVID, which just feels silly to even use that like post-COVID term, but it is what it is. I still feel like we're feeling the effects of it in this industry. But healthcare is still very strong. Senior living is probably one of the fastest growing markets in our industry right now. The need for senior living is growing immensely, and the demands of what those spaces required are also growing immensely. State and local government, still very strong. I'm still getting a lot of work in those public sector focused spaces. And K-12, higher education certainly is under some challenges, we'll just say right now, but we're still seeing at that state and local level, especially within K-12 environments, that the projects, there's still needs for that. There's still investment happening there. And I'm still seeing a lot of consistency within all of that. So as you're considering, what does the job market look like as you're putting yourself out there, for better or worse, we have entered a very digital, virtual realm when it comes to jobs, when it comes to interviewing, when it comes to job postings. Long gone are the days of being able to walk down the street and hand your resume in and hope to, connect with the hiring manager. It can be great. I mean, on the plus side, we are finding that interview processes are happening faster than ever. Historically, my company's been doing this for 57 years. We were tracking something closer to 60 to 70 days from the start of a search to the time of placement. Post-COVID, that average has dropped down to about 45 days. So the virtual job market, virtual interviewing, it's moving much faster than it used to. And that is a good thing, because, ultimately no one wants to waste their time. So if it's not going to work out, we'd rather know now, or, consequently, if it is going to be a great match, you're going to know that much sooner. Things like virtual interviews have really changed the landscape of that. So that is the good news. there are, of course, some challenges that come with the virtual job market. So, Gio, if you wouldn't mind skipping forward to, and the next slide there, actually, I'll kind of start talking a little bit more about what is most certainly been the biggest change in virtual interviewing, which is LinkedIn. I, as a recruiter, like to call LinkedIn my incomplete phone book. LinkedIn is, when you think about it, essentially one gigantic self-selected CRM. There's a backend to LinkedIn that I get to use called LinkedIn Recruiter. And when you're thinking about your profile as I'm putting my candidate profile card into a CRM so that hiring managers, so that recruiters, so that people in my network can find me, it really changes the landscape of what is necessary to have a LinkedIn page that can actually move the needle forward for you in your job search. So a couple of things to think about is, number one, like I said, it's a self-selected CRM. If you don't have anything on your LinkedIn page, I probably won't be able to find you. The more information that you can fill out, the easier it is for me to find you via keyword, via industry, via grad year, via school, via certification. If you have a technical skill set like SolidWorks or Revit or Creo, like those are all things that hiring managers are searching for because they want to plug and play. And so the more information that you can fill out, name, contact information, all of your experience, the more volume of information you have on that LinkedIn profile, the easier it's going to be for that profile to surface on the back end of LinkedIn Recruiter, which is essentially just driven by Boolean search. So a simple amount of research on, hey, how does Boolean search work will also help get you a little closer to what information might I be able to fill out that gets my profile more views. An up-to-date professional headshot. It does not need to be something you spend money on. It could be something that is just good lighting in front of a blank wall with a professional shirt on, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but a picture is, I don't know I think LinkedIn always tells us some of these stats, and I should have written this down, but a photo alone can increase visibility on your profile significantly. It legitimizes you as a candidate. It legitimizes how much, you're involved and how up to date your resume is and how likely it is I'm going to be able to get a hold of you. I would also recommend, if you are a person that is open to hearing about things, that you set your profile as open to work. You can make that open to work to only recruiters. So that means that only myself will notice that you have that turned on, which is maybe not good information. Gretchen, don't come for me in that one. But I would say if I would be remiss if I didn't encourage each and every one of you to be open to a conversation at any point. When we are talking about finding a new opportunity, we interview to see if we are interested. You do not need to be 100% interested to warrant a first conversation. When you have a job is sometimes the best time to find a new job, because it's kind of like going grocery shopping after dinner instead of before. You're more likely to make a more informed business decision for yourself when you do not need the job. Not that I don't mind coming home with the random sleeve of Oreos every once in a while, but when you're thinking about how do I think long-term about my career, how do I work strategically and make a smart business decision for myself, the best time for you to leverage that opportunity is when you don't need the job. You're just more likely to make a better decision. So turning that open to work to recruiters only just ensures that your LinkedIn profile is getting noticed more often and that you're getting considered for those opportunities opportunistically. If you're not following companies, industry associations, networking groups, industry-specific search firms, the Bridger Group posts every single job that we touch. And last year, we made over 350 placements in this industry alone nationally. We're taking on new searches every day. You just never know when something might land in our lap. And in the world of a virtual market, things move quickly. So it's to your advantage to be seeing those things before other people and getting your application in quickly and fast, because it just means the likelihood of actually getting to break through the Ethernet of the virtual job market is higher. And then also, the only other thing I would mention about LinkedIn is that It's not like Instagram where your ratio of like followers to like people following you like matters. Like LinkedIn is about connecting with as many people as possible. I can't remember the last time someone requested to add me on LinkedIn and I said no. There's no reason not to connect with everyone, because when you're thinking about the back end of LinkedIn, the closer you are in degrees of connection to me, the more likely I'm going to see your profile. So the more connected you are in your industry, the more connected you are with with hiring managers, with HR professionals, with people in your networking groups, the more likely it is your profile will surface to the top, you know, if you're having connections that are closer in degree. And then, yeah, like I said, take the call. If a recruiter calls you, I make about 80 outbound phone calls every day. I'm cold calling people all day long. I have no idea if you're interested in a job or not. No idea at all. But I am here to have the exploratory conversation. It's as much an interview for you as it is for, in this case, me or my client. And you lose nothing by taking the call. We like to say around here, recruiting magic happens on the phone. You just never know what a conversation might lead to. And a 5-minute phone call can change the trajectory of your career forever. And so I always recommend, even if you think you're not interested, even if you think that this recruiter is so far off base from what you want to do, I can't tell you how many times I have talked to a candidate for a role and said, you know what, you're not a fit for this, but you are a fit for something else that I'm working on. And now we're talking and we're cooking with, what do they say? Cooking with oil is, I think, is the word. So you just never know where it's going to lead you. And my unsolicited recruiter advice is just to always take the call. Then looking at other resources within LinkedIn, you can set up job alerts. So if there's a specific role, specific companies, specific titles that you're targeting within the job section of LinkedIn, you can actually set up alerts to notify you when new jobs that match that profile pop up. And again, when it comes to the virtual world of interviewing, being in that initial pool of candidates is so critical to making sure that your profile is getting looked at. Being quick and having a resume up to date at the ready that you can submit at the drop of a hat is only going to give you more advantage in setting yourself apart from the rest of the hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people that will apply for a job. I also like to talk about the 50% of fit rule. This is kind of tying back into like, don't let the fear rule you. But if you think you're even somewhere in the vicinity of 50% of fit for a role based on the requirements, it costs you nothing to apply. A lot of times the job description really encompasses the dream candidate, the unicorn candidate, so to speak. People love to create like a perfect profile and then they put that on the job description. But that doesn't mean there's not a willingness to explore a candidate that has a lot of those skill sets, but maybe not everything. So I always recommend, if you're not sure if you're a fit, submit your resume anyway. Because again, you just never know if you get on that phone with a recruiter, with what the magic of that phone call might lead to. And so I always recommend not self-selecting out of too many things just because you think you have maybe 2 less years of experience than the job description wants, or maybe you don't have a certain certification that it's looking for, or maybe you're, you know, in a slightly different industry, it's a slightly different product category, and the resume or the job application says we need someone coming from furniture, but you come from plumbing. Like, you just don't know what exactly the tolerance for that job recs requirements are. You just don't know the exact tolerance when you're applying. And so erring on the side of submitting your resume instead of not just gives you more shots at the ball and more exposure again. And then I would recommend, if you are, especially if you're an active candidate, keep a spreadsheet of when you applied for the job, what the job was, when you last heard from them, because when it comes to landing a job, candidates that follow up are more likely to get looked at. As a job sits open, right, and they're looking for that unicorn candidate, as it's sitting open and aging, you know, the tolerance for what makes a candidate a fit often loosens. And if you have been a candidate that has followed up once or twice on, hey, I submitted my resume on this date, I still remain very interested, the likelihood that somebody actually says, you know what, let's just talk to this person, it goes up, because showing interest is half the battle. At the end of the day, we're all just human beings, right? Like, we want people that see us, that respect us, that see value in us, and that ultimately feel like desired at the end of the day. And expressing interest in the role, showing a certain level of excitement, showing interest, it can be half the battle in getting that phone call back sometimes, especially in a sea of AI resumes and people just submitting to, hundreds of jobs a day. Showing that you have specific interest in that role with that hiring manager for that job at that company, again, it just helps break through that noise of I'm a legit human and I really want this job. Please, will you talk to me? So I always recommend keeping track of where you're at in process so that as you're applying for multiple things, you don't lose track of that or miss out on an opportunity. And then last but not least, I would say leverage every single resource. Find the hiring manager on LinkedIn. Go to the company webpage. Is there a design director or a VP of design? Is there a head of HR? Is there a head of sales? Is there a head of engineering? Is there a head of fill in the blank, right? Find that person, send them a message, let them know that you applied for the role and you remain very interested, that you would love to talk with them. A lot of times you're not going to get a response, but the butterfly effect of that, we just never know where it goes, right? That hiring manager may have pull in that job, they may not, but sometimes it can help get your resume on the right desk at the right time. If you really want to go down the route of being proactive, try finding the phone number. A lot of people put their phone numbers and contact information right on their LinkedIn page. Cold call the company, ask to speak with the head of HR. Hey, I just applied for this role. I'd love to talk with your head of HR and let them know that my resume is in their inbox. You can definitely do additional things besides just throwing your resume into the Ethernet and hoping for the best. So the only other suggestion I would have in that is looking for mutual connections as you're building your LinkedIn network and expanding that network virtually for yourself. Look for the people that work at that company, send them a message and say, hey, I just applied for this role. Do you know who the hiring manager is? Do you know how long they've been looking for this person? Could you put in a good word for me, right? So as you're kind of thinking about, like, last but not least things, like I said, search strategies change over time. So when the job is posted matters. Was it posted a week ago? Was it posted 2 months ago? As a job sits open, the need for somebody to fill that role usually becomes greater. The internal stress increases. The cost of not having that person in a role goes up. The willingness to think more creatively about how can we solve this problem also goes up. And so if you've applied for a role 3 weeks ago and it's still open and they're still accepting applicants, that's a great time to follow up, because again, it really comes down to urgency, relevancy, and recency. Is it an urgent need on the company's team? Have they heard from you recently? And how relevant is your skill set to what they're looking for? So I'll leave you with that. I know I just dumped an insane amount of information on everybody all at once, but if there's other questions about what I shared, definitely drop them in the chat because we'll circle around to it at the end. And I know Robin's going to kick us off now and kind of getting into nitty gritty on resume and cover letter and how to actually make yourself stand out as an applicant.
Thank you, Leah. Great tips, and I agree 100% with everything you just said. So I'm so happy. A lot of people have probably not done a resume in a while. It used to be a rule of thumb that a resume should be no more than 1 page. I don't agree with that any longer, especially now that everything is being uploaded into a website or applicant tracking system. I don't think we have to worry so much about how long of a resume it is. What you need to think about, though, is what's on that resume. As Leah mentioned, keyword searches are so important. So for those of you who don't know what that means, it's really a matter of what are the words that are going to be super important to an employer that would make them want to search for a specific skill. So Leah mentioned Revit or SolidWorks. If those are skills that you have, don't bury them in your resume. Make sure that they're pulled out in a skills section, like on the on the example we give you here. We have a special area just for skills. So make sure you think about every piece of software that you know and that it's out there on there. Now, sometimes people get a little confused too with spelling, especially things like AutoCAD. You know, how do I do it? It doesn't really matter anymore because the keyword search will look for it, whether it's all caps, some caps, or not. Um, but there are some rules of the road when it comes to resumes that I just want to go over. However, as you know, that this is being recorded, there are links on the slide. I don't know if you'll get the slides, but if you don't, you're welcome to go on the Co-op and Career page at Wentworth Institute of Technology and use all of our resources, whether you're an alum or not. By the way, I'd love to know if you can raise your hand somehow or drop it in the chat. How many of you are Wentworth alums, since Wentworth builds Boston? That's what I really think we do. So I'd love to hear from some of the alums. But even again, if you're not an alum, please know that our resources are available to you.
And I will be, Robin, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I will be mailing the slides out at the end of this so that everyone gets them. And these, as she stated, the links will be live and take you to some of the places that she references.
Thank you, Jill. So this is a resume of a current college student. So if you're currently in school or currently earning another degree, then your education would want to be at the top. But if you're a couple of years away from your education, then please move that closer to the bottom and put with your related experience at the top, your professional experience. You can name it whatever you'd like. And resumes go in chronological order backwards. So you always start with your most current experience and you work your way down. You don't want to go back so many years that it's irrelevant. And the further away you go from the present, the shorter that description should be. Really focus a lot on what you're currently doing over the last couple of years, because again, that's the most relevant. And as you've heard, this industry changes so quickly, people want to know what your current skills are. This example here is giving bullets. You don't have to use bullets. You can use paragraph format. But what's important again is you start with action verbs and you think of something called the STAR method. What is the situation? What was the task that you did? What were the accomplishments and what are the results? And again, you'll find that in the resume guide. You don't have to remember that. It's all there. Other experiences you might have that are not specifically related, if it's tangentially related, go ahead and put it on. If it shows that maybe you jumped out of facility management for a little bit and went into something else, and you just want to show that you were consistently employed, that would be fine under another experience. But if you've been working in FM for a long time, you don't have to put in anything else other than that kind of work. Excuse me. I think that's all I want to really say about resumes, because again, it's all pretty in the resume guide. However, I do want to say, I'm sorry, can you just back up? I just going to contradict myself for a second. We used to, a long time ago, put our mailing address on our resumes. We don't have to do that any longer. You can just put in your first and last name, the city and the state you're in, your phone number, your email address, and the link to your LinkedIn profile should be on there. The other thing that should not be on your resume is anything that identifies you in any way, so you don't face any unnecessary discrimination. So we don't put in our genders, we don't put in our religion, our date of birth, our age, marital status, number of children. And you also do not want to put photos on your resume. They're fine on LinkedIn, but not on your resume.
Robin, how do you approach, just interrupting for a second, dates if you're old like me? If someone sees my college graduation date, they're going to say, wow, she's an old lady. Is that good, bad? Can you leave it off?
Certainly leave it off, but that will even raise other red flags, right? People will be like, oh, they may assume you're even older than you are. Not that being old is bad, it means you're seasoned. I think it's fine to put it on. We know people get their college degrees years after being in an industry too. So there could be some people on this call that have 15 years of experience, but maybe just recently got a degree. So You know, Gretchen, it's always a crapshoot when you are the candidate. You just don't know what is going to resonate with the other person who's reading the resume. There's something called the halo and the horn effect. You know, they could love something that you did, like maybe you put down that you were from my hometown, and I suddenly love you because I love everybody from my hometown. Or I hate you because you're from my hometown, and I hate everybody from my hometown. So you just don't know how other people are going to receive the information. But if you really are uncomfortable with putting the date of your graduation, then feel free to leave it off. Just know that people might assume you graduated even earlier than you did. Okay. And then a cover letter should always go with a resume. Even though the ad might say send a resume to, a cover letter will really help you to stand out because you're going to be able to really drill down where we want a resume to be succinct and to the point. In a cover letter, you can really talk about a specific project or something that you're very proud of. So in your first paragraph, you're really talking about why are you writing? If somebody has referred you to that job or to that person, drop that name right in the very beginning so they know, like, oh, Gretchen Barron suggested I talk to that person. I think highly of Gretchen, therefore I'm going to put this resume at the top of the pile. And again, let them know which job you're applying for because we know many companies have multiple jobs and how you found that job. A lot of companies do try to measure the impact of where they're spending their advertising dollars. So let them know where you were found. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are really a lot about you. Why are you a good fit for that job? There's an acronym KISS, keep it simple, silly. I like to really be clear on paragraphs 2 and 3 that this is who you're asking for in your cover, in your job description, in your requirements, and this is who I am. Look how easily we go together like two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. So really use 2 and 3 paragraphs for that. And paragraph 4 is really about thanking them for reading your materials and letting them know you are going to follow up. And then closing out strong again about why, again, you're such a great candidate. I really like to be very specific when I tell people when I'm going to follow up. Like, I will telephone you the week of August 18th to confirm that you've received my resume and to hopefully schedule an interview. Because that's really the bottom line. That's your ask. I want an interview. I want a meeting. So make sure you put that in that that's what you're going to do. And then you've got to follow up and do it. So on that spreadsheet that Leah recommended using, make sure you put the date of that phone call, who you spoke to, and what the next steps might be from that phone call. Now, the hard thing is, and we all know it, is getting somebody to take that call. So again, using the information that Leah provided, use LinkedIn, try to find alumni who work at your work at the institution you want to apply to. Find people that are going to open doors for you and let them do that. It's okay to ask for help. That's really what networking and job searching is all about, is really leaning into all of your networks. So that could again be IFMA, could be your college or university, alumni, faculty, other employers that know people. I'm going to guess the facility management, while it's a large industry, people know each other and it's probably a tight-knit community. So lean into your community and try very hard to get people to help you. Now, one thing I want to make sure you do look at, and I'm going to stay on that slide, but I really want to talk about the newest way people are getting noticed and how artificial intelligence is really impacting the way job searches are done. So one of my favorite, and there's a lot of different AI tools, but I tend to lean into Chat GPT. It is free to use. They do limit how many times a day you can use it, but it's going to be enough for a job search. So keep in mind though, when you're using AI, they're pulling a lot of information in from all the different algorithms and platforms. So even though it's artificial intelligence, it doesn't always give you back accurate information. So as a user, you've got to be really cognizant of what they're providing, read everything, and then fix the errors that they make because they do make errors. So one thing I love to do is with a resume. I'm hoping that everybody does have a resume, current. But if you don't, what you can do is take the most recent resume you have, add, upload that into ChatGPT, and that's just a copy and paste. And then add some things that you've been doing recently in your newest job and ask ChatGPT to create some bullets for you for what you've learned in your new job. Make sure you read it very carefully because, again, it assumes some things sometimes, and it's also not going to be written in your voice. So you really want to look at those things that they gave you and write it so it sounds like you, because if you don't, it will be very obvious to the reader that it was done by someone else. Make sure you again look for keywords that you want to have on that resume based on what you've done. One thing too, before you upload anything into ChatGPT, we remove anything that is your personal identifiers. Take off your name, take off your phone number, your email address, and your LinkedIn, because you don't want that out there in the big old internet of things. So just only put in your work history and your education. You can also use it to take your resume and the job description of the job you want to apply for, and you can ask ChatGPT all sorts of things about it, like how qualified am I for this job? What should I put in a cover letter for this job? Help me write that cover letter. So you can even be very specific and say, take this cover letter and write it for this position at this company with my information specifically. So I'm going to grab some water. Let's assume you get the interview. You can then use ChatGPT again with that job description that you've uploaded and your resume and ask ChatGPT to give you some mock interviewing, some practice interviewing. You can ask it to help you write questions that you can expect, say as a facility manager, that you'd get in a 30-minute first round interview. Or create a list of questions that they can use, you can use from the company's website. The other thing you can do is use ChatGPT to help you find companies that actually have open jobs in your geographic area. So you can tell it, provide me a list of companies in Boston that are hiring facility managers with 5 years experience or more in furniture. And then look through that. So again, AI is changing everything, the way we do business. It's probably going to put people like me out of business soon because it will be able to offer career advice. But again, nothing's better than the personal. So I don't believe facility managers will ever be AI'd out of work because the relationships you build, the personal relationships, are vital to your industry. So I believe, maybe, hopefully I'm not wrong, that you are AI proof, which is wonderful to hear. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. And back to you, Leah.
Yeah, no, Robin, spot on, definitely. And I think I'll even be able to build a little bit on kind of what you're talking about here in just a minute, just regarding what we like to call transferable skills. So hang tight, but I'm gonna definitely add on to some of what you said. Starting with just some basic interview tips. So congrats, you politely harassed a hiring manager to the point that they are willing to give you an interview. Great job. What do you do once you get there? And I'm going to go over some stuff. Some of this is going to be basic, but let me just tell you, as a recruiter, there's a reason why I feel I need to share all of this stuff. I have had every story under the sun that you can imagine, and you'd be surprised. So I'm just going to go over some basics and then we'll get into some more nuance. So first and foremost, before you go to an interview, you should certainly know the job that you're interviewing for and the company that you're interviewing for, and potentially even the hiring manager. Can you find them on LinkedIn? Can you find something that you have in common with them? Do you have a mutual connection, a mutual association, a mutual degree? Or are you an alumni? Like, find something about the hiring manager, So that way, when you connect with them, you can be curious about their story and what brought them to that company. Number one thing is like research the company and come with some good questions. The great news about virtual interviews is that you can have cheat sheets in front of you and nobody knows. So you can certainly come prepared with questions. You can come prepared with talking points. You can come prepared with all of that and have it right in front of you while you're on a video call or a phone call so that you have it at your fingertips. There are such things. I'm sorry, maybe this is controversial, Robin, but there are bad questions in this world. And when it comes to interviewing, there is not actually a bad question. However, there are bad questions given when you ask them. So if you're on a first interview, it's to your interest to, even a second interview, it's to your best interest to be asking questions that actually help you understand whether or not you want this job. Outside of what's the pay, what's the vacation, can I work from home, which can honestly communicate disinterest more than interest. Pretty much everything is fair game, that said. And what I would recommend, and this sounds silly because especially when you're interviewing, especially if you're an active candidate, it can feel like, well, it doesn't matter what my question is because I need the job. But I just want to remind you and encourage you that you do have something to offer. You are bringing something to the table, whether it's going to be a fit for this job or not is irrelevant. And I always encourage my candidates to spend time thinking about like, what is it that you actually need to know? What helps you determine whether or not this is a good fit for you long term? Because ultimately, as hiring managers, we don't just want a candidate. We want a candidate that's going to be a great long-term mutual fit. And so spending time thinking about questions that you genuinely want to know that have to do with the company, the hiring manager, the role, the expectations, all of that is fair game. And I encourage you to spend time coming up with that and spending time coming up with those questions before you actually get on that call. The worst thing you could do outside of saying, hey, what's the pay on the first interview is probably saying, I don't have any questions. Not having questions communicates disinterest. It communicates that you're not invested in the process. So even if you don't actually care and you're like, you know what, I need a paycheck, I will take any job. I don't actually care about this company, but I would still come prepared with questions because it just communicates that you're a more interested candidate. So as you're thinking about, you know, how else can I really put my best foot forward in interviewing, dress to impress. I have had a lot of candidates in interviews in my time, and I've never had a client call me and tell me that a candidate has come overdressed. I have had clients call me and tell me that candidates have come underdressed. It's only worked out for me once, and it was in Las Vegas, and he showed up in a Hawaiian shirt with more buttons undone than one would generally recommend. But for some reason, because it was Las Vegas, it worked. So unless you're living in Las Vegas, I recommend showing up dressed professionally, and when in doubt, go for being overdressed rather than underdressed. I would also recommend when it comes to video interviewing, making sure that you've tested that link, you've tested the audio, you confirm that your headphones are charged. Like, make sure that you are set up and ready to be on the call a couple of minutes early. You don't have to be on there 15 minutes early. That's a little aggressive in a virtual interview, but certainly being ready to log in within 5 minutes of the interview is recommended. What you don't want to do is realize that you have a tech issue and your meeting is starting right now, and now you're going into your interview feeling stressed, feeling flustered. It's just never, it's not good for you. It's not good for them. I always recommend testing that stuff out early. Set yourself up in front of a neutral background. If you're taking the call from home, totally fine. Maybe don't do it in front of like a very messy bedroom. Put yourself, if you don't have a home office, that's okay, but set yourself up in a place that is neutral, or at the very least, have a background that is prepared for it, that you're not gonna, you know, reveal the mess behind you. But I would still recommend always, and this kind of goes into dressing as well, dress head to toe. I wear shoes. I tell all my candidates, wear down to your shoes. When I was interviewing during COVID, actually had somebody ask me to stand up to confirm that I was fully dressed for the interview. Now that's extreme. I actually have never heard of anybody having that happen to them before, but it put the fear of God in me, and now I tell all my candidates to do it just in case. But it also, you know, it is one of those things where if you're wearing pajamas on the bottom and a nice shirt on top, like, how mentally ready are you for that conversation? Dressing, there's a lot of psychology that goes into the way that we dress, the way we present ourselves, and that goes into your background and your clothes and all of the things that we do to present ourselves well. So make sure that, you know, your space is tidy. I'm using the blur feature. I feel like it just helps keep the focus on me and my face. And I would say you would want the interviewer to be doing that as well. So I always like recommending either a professional background or using the blur feature. And then I would also just say when it comes to virtual interviews and phone interviews, something that's a little counterintuitive is when we're talking face to face, a lot of times we give verbal cues to communicate that we are listening by saying things like, yes, oh yeah, okay, great, you know, whatever that is, those small interjections that in a face-to-face interview are great. They show that you're engaged in the conversation, they show that you're paying attention. However, in a virtual interview, whether it's a video or a phone, those interjections can actually be very disruptive. It can disrupt the flow of communication. It might mean that you miss something that the hiring manager says, like if the audio cuts out. So I always recommend in video interviews and on phone interviews, taking time to just pause and wait until, you know, whoever you're speaking with is finished talking, and then adding on to what they say at that time. When it comes to phone and video interviews, things I don't recommend, I would not take the call from a coffee shop. I would not take the call from like somewhere on the street. If you're at your office and you need to leave the office, a car is a better place than standing out on the sidewalk. Cutting out all that background noise, it's really distracting, especially on a video or a phone interview when it's a lot of background noise. I always recommend making sure you're finding a place that's quiet. And then when it comes to like, hey, speakerphone, headphones, I actually find that headphones can be a great asset when it comes to phone or video interviews because it allows you to be hands-free, similar to speakerphone. But again, we want to ensure that you're heard, that things aren't getting missed, that you sound really great on the phone. And having a speakerphone situation can sometimes, like I said, create outside noise, outside distraction, other things that just we want them focusing on you and what you're saying. So then also, and I feel like this is, again, kind of obvious, kind of silly, but if you're on a phone interview, put a mirror in front of yourself and practice smiling. Smiling is something that we can hear on the phone. I can tell if somebody is enjoying the conversation and if they're not. And if you're not a person that's naturally going to be very outgoing, as awkward and weird as it may sound, making sure that you are smiling when you're on a video call is something that, again, it communicates excitement, it communicates interest, and it communicates like amicability that most people want when they're looking for a good culture fit. So I always recommend, like I said, smile if you can in an interview. And then when you're talking about an in-person, hopefully you guys have gotten past the phone screening, you've gotten past the virtual, and now they're asking you to come into the office. That's great. There's a lot of things that happen in an in-person interview that have no merit on you actually increasing your chances of the job, but do have a merit on decreasing your chances of the job. For example, not coming prepared. It might not help you by bringing your resume in person. It's not going to make you stand out from the crowd because pretty much everyone is going to do that. However, if you don't do it, it might be something that they know as like a lack of preparedness or a lack of professionalism. So coming prepared with a pad of paper, questions prepared, a pen, several copies of your resume and or your portfolio, whatever it is that you want to bring. I always recommend that you do that. And then Robin even touched on this as well, that STAR interview method, what you're talking about: situation, task, action, and result. This is a pro tip. You can actually come up with those answers before you know the questions are going to ask you. Because generally speaking, those STAR questions, they're situation based. Tell me about a time when. You can come up with 5 give or take, examples in which you were presented with a challenge and you had a result to that challenge that you can have prepared and in your back pocket before the question's even answered. And then when the question is presented, you can kind of pick and choose, okay, which of these makes the most sense for this situation? And that gives you the opportunity to be prepared for the question while still catering to the answer that they're looking for. And like I said, what they're really looking for is, what was the result? You had this challenge, how did you handle it? And so thinking through reverse engineering that in advance of your conversation with any interview, whether it's a phone, video, or in person, it's just going to help set you up for success and keep you on your toes when you're on the interview. And this is where I feel like the rubber really meets the road. And we're kind of talking about what you were touching on earlier, Robin, transferable skills. Transferable skills are really the crux of every interview. What most, well, I shouldn't say most, what every hiring manager is looking for is a plug and play. I have a problem, it's creating an issue within my organization, and I need to solve it. What is the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for me to solve that problem? It's by finding a candidate that has everything, if not most, of what I'm looking for. As we've already talked about, it would be pretty unusual to actually walk into any job interview having being 100% a fit for every single thing they're looking for. It's just not likely. And so as you're looking at the job description, the homework that I give every single, and you can click forward, Gio, I'll kind of get into this here. Thank you. But one thing that you can do in advance of your interview is actually spend time thinking about yourself. We definitely want to come prepared with questions on the company. We want to come prepared with like the hiring manager doing all that research, but the whole point of the interview is for you to talk about yourself, which, maybe that's obvious, but I feel like it's the thing that gets deprioritized the least in how we prepare. And so as you're preparing for that interview, number one, I would read the job description. You'd be amazed at what you can learn by just simply reading the job description. But if you were to take a copy of the job description and a copy of your resume and a highlighter, I would say highlight all the things that are the same and make sure you talk about those things. When it comes to any new job, there's going to be a learning curve. And I do feel as though some candidates get a little tripped up around how do I talk with confidence without sounding braggadocious. Focusing on the things that you're walking in the door with on day one just helps set you up for presenting yourself as that plug and play solution that they're looking for. And again, the pro tip on this is, especially on a virtual interview, you could have those bullet points written out right in front of you. And that way you make sure to hit on every single thing that hey, I don't know X, Y, or Z, but I know on day one, I'm walking in the door with this. Communicating that with confidence to the hiring manager just gives them more confidence that you are a fit. And then last but not least, the question that everyone always wants to ask, how do I talk about money? I don't work for free. I don't think that any of you guys work for free. I mean, maybe there's some trust fund babies out there that are trying to volunteer their time, but I'm not. So when it comes to talking about money, my advice always is being upfront, direct, and transparent. Now, this is all taking with a grain of salt, right? Because ultimately we don't want to pin you into a low number. We want to make sure that you're getting the best deal possible. And everybody has a different risk tolerance when it comes to how much they want to communicate about money and how much they don't. That said, I find that candidates who get the best offers are usually the candidates who are asking for what they want directly. The number one advice I'm going to give you is don't give a range. Do not give a range, because you want the high end of that range and your hiring manager is going to hear the low end. If what you really want is the high end, ask for the high end. They will make you a competitive offer based on that. And maybe it will be that number, maybe it'll be something below, but I always recommend saying, hey, I'm so glad you asked. It's obviously a very important question. And this is in the case of a salesperson, but like currently my base is X. Last year, my W-2 was Y. I'm likely on track to make Z this year. You and your organization seem like a great place to work. And I'm confident that, based on that and understanding that I would be the best candidate for that, if that's the decision you make, that you'd make me a great offer based on that information, and just put it back in their court. Make them make the decision on what that range is. Robin, yes.
I don't hope you don't mind if I jump in.
Yeah.
There's two things I just wanted to say about that slide that we were just on.
Yeah.
Again, people get really nervous that they are not 100% qualified for a job. And I want to tell you, you don't want to be 100% qualified, because if you know everything on day one or day two, you're going to be so bored by the 6 month mark. You really want to have a job where you're going to stretch and grow. So give yourself that grace. That 50% rule is perfect, because that's what you want to do every time you get a new job, is continue your career progression. You can't do that if you keep doing the same job over and over again.
Yep.
But number two, I want to disagree with Leah on. So we're going to
Uh-oh.
politely disagree. And it could be because Leah and I live in different states, right? Leah's in Michigan.
Yeah, I'm in Michigan. Yep.
Here in Massachusetts, we were one of the first states to make it illegal for an employer to ask what your current salary is.
Mm.
And the reason that is because of the perpetual wage gap between men and women. So if people want to continue to pay you based on your prior salary, women will never catch up to men. So if people want to talk about money, I always encourage you to do your research and use things like salary.com, indeed.com, the national, I was going to say the National Bureau of Labor Statistics. That might have it too. But you can find salaries based on your geographic region, based on your years of experience in your industry, and then go in and say things like, based on my experience and my education and my skills, my research shows that in Greater Boston, I should be making between this and this. But because I have the top, so much experience, and I love what Leah's saying, I expect to make, and you give them that top of that range. But when you can go in and with knowledge is power. We know research is really important. So use all those tools. And again, you're welcome to go back out to the Wentworth site. We have information about how to do salary research. Please use it and use that information to your advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Robin's point, yes, there's a myriad of different ways to approach this question. And in more than anything, the number one piece of advice when it comes to money is ask for what you need and be confident in doing it. And a big part of that conversation about that wage transparent or the wage gap that Robin is talking about is that women just tend to be less likely to make that ask. Men tend to be more confident in saying, hey, I need to be here. And so this, of course, applies to everybody, but certainly within that conversation as well, it's even more important that we as women are saying, I need to be making this. And ultimately, in my experience, and this is obviously everybody has their own experience with this, but in my experience, most companies are working within a range. They have some sort of range that they are working in. And sometimes that range is hard and fast because the budget is the budget is the budget. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, well, if the Michael Jordan of facilities management fell in my lap, like I could find $30,000 more. And so ultimately, actually thinking about, before going into what Robin was saying, thinking about where do I actually need to be, and going into that conversation prepared with a number to share when you are asked, so that you can answer the question directly without putting in any kind of filler words, things like, well, I'm hoping to be here. That indicates that maybe you have a range that is less than that, right? I need this in order to warrant a change. I need Y in order for a change to make financial sense for me and my family. When it comes to interviewing, money will always come down to you, your background, and how well you interview. So ultimately, there usually is some sort of range. And I would always just encourage folks, be confident in it and answer it directly, because what's the worst case scenario? They decide they can't afford you. Is that a job that you really want anyway? It just is, it's a waste of time to not make the ask directly. It's a waste of your time, first and foremost, and it's a waste of the hiring manager's time. We've all seen the episode of Say Yes to the Dress, where the bride falls in love with the dress that they can't afford. My encouragement is to just not be the dress that the bride can't afford, right? If they can't afford you, better to find that out sooner rather than later and move on. So I know we're over time, so I'll kind of wrap that up, but the only other thing I'll say is come prepared with how you want to share your narrative. Why are you interviewing today? What is it about the role, your current situation? And I would recommend there's a fine line between being transparent and honest and straightforward, and using the interview as a therapy session. So just keep that in mind. We don't need to know every single nuance of what's going on in your personal life that's led you to the need to make a change. But sometimes being transparent can lead to some really authentic conversations. I just had a candidate get a job last week because she was transparent about the fact that she was going through a divorce. Use your judgment, okay? I'm not recommending that you say that, but for one reason or another, her and the hiring manager, they had a great connection. It kind of led to that conversation of like, what's going on? And ultimately, the hiring manager felt like she had an extremely strong emotional connection with that candidate because she had gone through it herself. And that is the candidate that got the job. And so sometimes being a little bit transparent can lead to more authentic conversation. But I do recommend being prepared regardless of what you want to share, whether it's personal or not, with why you're interested in the job and why you're in the interview in the first place. And then the last piece of unsolicited recruiter advice I'll leave you with is close yourself well. If at the end of the interview, because again, we're not interviewing because we're 100% interested, we're interviewing because we're somewhere between 0 and 50% interested. You are interested in learning more. So if at the end of that conversation, you're thinking, this sounds awesome, I want this job, I recommend asking for the job because we don't get what we don't ask for. And so close yourself well. What that might sound like is, Gretchen, thank you so much for your time today. I got to say, I'm really impressed with what I've heard. This sounds like it could be a really great fit for me. I'm definitely interested in the opportunity. What do next steps look like? And is there anything that would prevent me from moving forward in the process right now? They're going to say one of two things. Gretchen's either going to say, honestly, no, like I agree. It was a great conversation. Next steps look like this, and we'll be in touch soon. In which case you can say, yay, I was hoping you would say that. On the flip side, and this is the worst case scenario, Gretchen's going to say, actually, yeah, I didn't quite understand what you meant when you said this. Or we actually didn't talk about your experience with this specific program. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? At the very least, it gives you a chance to address any concern that they have head on and give yourself the best chance at getting that next step in the interview process. Because like Robin said earlier, it's how do we get to the interview and how do we keep moving forward through the interview? So again, expressing interest, telling them that you are interested, it's not always obvious, and asking whether or not there's anything that would prevent you moving forward in the process. It's all just going to be to your asset in helping you land that next step in the process. So that's all. That's what I've got. And I'm sorry I'm over time. I get passionate about money. So.
And I know, Robin, you mentioned in Massachusetts now postings are required to list the salary. I know just from my own perusing of LinkedIn, only about 25% seem to have that. Do you know, is there an exemption if it's like a nationwide posting? Is there any penalty if employers don't do it? I'm just curious because, I get postings all the time on LinkedIn. I'm not actually looking for a job, but if I was, but very, very few of them currently have the salary listed.
I think they must probably post it like on their company website, the salary ranges. Not quite sure if they need to do it on social media. Leah, am I correct on that?
Yeah, in every state, you're starting to get into state issues. So it really depends on the company and where the company is based, where the role is based. I do find that they will, and sometimes too, and Robin, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like sometimes the pay ranges are accurate and sometimes they're not. So I am still always a big believer in really understanding what is the number that you need in order to say yes to a job. And obviously you probably have a range of like, I'd do cartwheels through the door if I could get this, but I would accept this. And so figuring out what that number really is for you in advance of the conversation, regardless of what the range looks like, I do think is really important because sometimes companies do lowball on the range, but again, maybe there's some more flex than what we know. So even as we're looking at that like 50% of fit rule, I still always encourage, like, if you're in the ballpark, now, if you're like $100,000 over what the range is, that's probably a little unrealistic. But if you're within a $20,000 to $30,000 swing of that range, apply for the job and see where it goes, especially if you're an active candidate, because again, you just don't know where that conversation will lead. And sometimes there is more flexibility depending on the company and the role and how they handle that internal posting. I work with some companies that post the midpoint rather than the range. So it just depends, honestly. But Yeah, it's tricky, Gretchen, because everybody does handle it differently. And I have other clients who say, no, we don't play that game. This is the range, the money is the money. We're putting it out there. And that's the way we hope people do it. But unfortunately, it is not the norm for every single company that I work with. So
Thank
Yeah,
you
do you
both.
find that the people with those big ranges that can suddenly find 20 or $30,000 in their budget tends to be in a certain industry and not in others?
yeah, that's a really good question. I would say it's less to do with the industry and more to do with the role. If it's a critical hire, especially if it's like a more senior position, sometimes there is more flexibility, and it really depends on how the company is structured. Some companies, like for example, Creative Office Resources, it's more to do with the years of experience, where there are actually predefined specific ranges for like a level one designer, a level two designer, and that has to do more so with internal equity in my experience than it does with like actual budget. Because how do you have
I will
a
say, Leah,
designer?
I just want to interrupt you for a second. That's
Yeah,
not exactly how COR does it. So that might
okay.
be true for other dealerships, but
Yes,
ours is
yes.
a little
So
more nuanced than that.
exactly. Yeah. And so yeah, all that to say, if you're talking about a head of sales though, and you need $50,000 more, I do find that clients, especially if they're interviewing with executive leadership or if they're interviewing at smaller companies, sometimes those barriers don't exist the same way that they would at like a larger company where internal equity is a really critical part of hiring. If you're working at a smaller, scrappier company and it's family owned and they're flying by the seat of their pants and they find the Michael Jordan of what they're looking for, you'd be surprised. Sometimes money can kind of fall out of trees, in my experience, for the right candidate with the right experience, with the right timing, so.
The last question I want, if money is important to people, should people like stay away from nonprofits, hospitals, higher ed, and be more toward the corporate side of FM?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. I have now I will say, so I primarily recruit for manufacturers and dealerships and some independent rep firms. I have not done a ton of work in nonprofit specifically. So take this with a grain of salt, but I do not really notice a difference in like industry, like in vertical, so to speak. Like between healthcare and corporate, I actually find that they're quite similar. I think it has more to do again with the company. Like, for example, in my experience, Miller Knoll is historically one of the lowest paying manufacturers in our industry, yet they are the largest manufacturer in the industry versus, like I'm working with a little company right now in Boston called Source International. They're a $35 million manufacturer. They're a second generation family owned business. And I've never seen compensation plans like what they put together because the roles are big, they're wide, they wear a lot of hats, and they're willing to pay people to wear all those hats. It's just a smaller, scrappier environment. And they don't have a name that sells itself. They do have to attract talent differently in order to get the people that they want on board versus a company like Miller Knoll. They are kind of like the premier manufacturer in the space. They don't need you like a smaller company does. Like there's a line out the door of people that want to go to work for a company like that. So if you're not in the range that they are comfortable with from a pay standpoint, they're more likely to just move on to the next candidate versus a smaller company, in my experience, often has a little bit more nimbleness and flexibility around how they're actually attracting and attaining that talent. So
People are
Thank
going to
you.
want you to repeat the name of
That's
that company that pays really well in the
yeah,
Boston.
right.
Thank you, ladies. I have to kind of wrap us up because we're right at the 1:15 mark, and I know that we could continue on for a very long time. There were some terrific questions that you guys both answered around ATS and keywords on resumes, about where to put your portfolio link. So those are in the chat. So that was terrific. I also wanted to say, as a hiring manager, I love getting cover letters because it tells me whether you're a good written communicator or not. You'd be amazed at how many people can't write a basic cover letter. And if you can't do that, in my world, you're probably not going to be good at client communication either. So I love cover letters. But thank you both so, so much for everything that you've offered today, all of the links that you've shared. I encourage everyone to reach out to Robin and Leah on LinkedIn after this. and just really, there's so much that we could talk about. I know as a hiring manager, I just like my brain is going all the time. So I thank you both so very, very much. And thank you to Gio for running the slides. I'm sorry, Michelle, if there's anything else you wanted to add.
I was just going to say too, if there was a question that you had specifically that we didn't get to, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat. I know we ran out of time, so please don't hesitate to reach out. This is something I feel really passionately about. So if there is something specific, I'm always happy to talk one-on-one if there's a question that wasn't answered today.
Same. And thank you for inviting us.
I may take some of the chat questions and forward them to you guys, or the one I did receive one via email that I will send to see if we can get some answers to people. Yeah. So I appreciate all of your time, and Michelle, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin and Leah. This was fantastic. As somebody that just hired a manager level, I went through some of the pains that you said on the don'ts list. So I love that. Thanks for getting it out there. But thank you everybody who joined us today. If you're not a member of IFMA Boston, please do consider joining our chapter. We offer these types of programs, monthly, throughout the year. We have in-person, virtual, so please do consider joining us. If you want more information, you can either visit our website or reach out to Gio at ifmaboston.org. So thank you all for joining. Hope to see you at future events, and have a great week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.